friends, and welcome to another episode of Growing as Global Christians. Thanks for joining me. Today I'd like to talk about a small country called Togo. Now you might be asking yourself, Togo? Where's Togo? I've never heard of it before. Well, let me help you. I brought with me today my handy dandy Jim Dandy globe, and you'll see right here in front of me is the continent of Africa. On the west coast of the continent there is a very small strip of land called Togo. And Togo is a very small country. It's only 21,000 square miles, which is about a quarter of the size of South Dakota. And the population is only around 8 million people, which is kind of the metropolitan Chicago area. So Togo is very small, but it's a beautiful country. On the southern coast is the Gulf of Guinea, which is kind of the South Atlantic Ocean. So there are beaches and lagoons and marshes. And the further inland that you go, the more north that you travel, the countryside becomes more and more hilly and is kind of more like the African savanna that you might imagine in your mind. Here are two other quick facts about Togo. Number one, it became an independent country in 1960 and it gained its independence from France. And there's still lots of French influence in Togo today. In fact, the official language is French. And also, if you eat at a restaurant or an eatery in Togo, you'll probably notice that the cuisine is very French-like. They have French desserts and baguettes, and they drink French wine. So still lots of French influence in Togo. And secondly, from a religious perspective, about 30% of Togolese people claim Christianity as their religion, 20% are Muslim, and the other half, 50%, follow some kind of African tribal religions of various sorts. So that's a little bit about Togo. Well, here are two ways that we can be praying for Togo this week. But before I share those, let me share a very quick just praise and a story from Togo. I have a good colleague and friend who's a Togolese pastor. He is the pastor at a small church in Lome, which is the capital of Togo. And he shared this story with me. He said over the last 6 to 8 weeks, he said, I've really been struggling with hepatitis. I've had headaches and just nausea and lack of energy. He said it's been a real struggle. But he said last week God really energized me. He met with the leaders of his church, and he's got a small church, maybe 25 or 30 adults and probably 60 or 70 children. The leaders met and they were talking about a lot of the children in the surrounding neighborhood and how them and their families were really suffering during this time of COVID. And as a church, they said, we have to do something about this. So they gathered their limited resources and they bought around 100 kilos of rice, some oil, and some spaghetti. And they put little bags together and they went around to these families and they gave each of these families a bag and they prayed for them and said, God bless you. And he said, you know, the next day I was really suffering. I was in a lot of pain. And he said there was a knock at my door. And it was one of the fathers from one of the families, and he had tears in his eyes, and he said, I just want to tell you thank you for the food that you gave my family. On behalf of my whole family, you gave us food for the rest of our week so that we might be able to eat. So God be the glory for the ways that he is working through this small church as they sacrificially obey the Lord and serve their community. Here are two ways that you can be praying for Togo this week. Number one, pray for the churches. My friend said, you know, a lot of times Christianity is mixed together with their African religions and their African culture. He said, especially during this time of COVID when they're not able to meet together, he said, pray for the church that they would know the truth and that they would pursue after God's truth because it's God's truth that will set them free. So pray for the churches. And number two, pray for the children. You know, children all across the world right now are very vulnerable, but he said in particular, some of the communities in his city, many of the children are very vulnerable. Their families are unable to work and they're hungry. He said, one, pray for their hunger. Pray that God would provide food for them. Number two, pray for their safety. Many of them are not in safe homes. And number three, pray for their protection. Unfortunately, human trafficking is an issue in Togo, so pray for the protection. Pray for the children of Togo. Pray for the churches of Togo. To God be the glory for what he's doing in and through this small nation for his glory and namesake. Thank you for your prayers. God bless you and have a great week.